Welcome to lesson 2 of the Beginner Bag Maker Bootcamp. This lesson is going to be all about the essentials of needles, fabric, interfacing, what presser feet to use, and also other notions that we use in sewing and bag making. So these basics really set the foundation for a durable and well-made bag. So let's talk about needles. Needles can make a really big difference in the end result of whatever bag or project you're working on. So having the wrong needle can end up in breaking needles. You can also have skipped stitches. You can have bunched up thread underneath your project. You can also damage your fabric or your machine. So when you shop for needles, you'll notice that on the pack there are different sizes. The numbers usually indicate the size of the needle. So the larger numbers are usually the European sizes and the smaller numbers are the American sizes. The European sizes range from 60 to 110 and the American sizes from 8 to 18. So let's take a look at a few of these needles and what they're good for. I always have some universal needles in my sewing room. They're great for lightweight, medium fabrics, just any basic project that you're working on. And I do make a lot of bags with denim and canvas, and so these heavy duty needles are great for that. And because I use a lot of woven fabric, the Microtex needles are great for top stitching and whenever you want a really nice and neat precision stitch. So a good rule of thumb is to always match the needle size to the fabric weight. So like a 90-14 needle is really good for a medium weight fabric, and a 116 needle is good for denim fabric, just thicker fabric. So now let's talk about presser feet. Choosing the right presser foot, depending on the task that you're working on, can really make a difference in the project as well. The presser foot is just a sewing machine attachment that just keeps your fabric flat and smooth while you're sewing. So here are some of the ones that I like to always use. So most of the time when I'm sewing, I'm using just a regular standard presser foot. I use that on most of the projects that I'm doing. It's just great for general stitching. And then underneath that is the zipper foot. So the zipper foot I use a lot when I'm adding zippers to my projects. So whenever I need to add a zipper to a bag, I'll put the zipper foot on. You can change the position of the zipper foot, which is great. And whenever I'm doing edge stitching, it's nice to just have a zipper foot on as well, because then you can get really close to the edge and just change the position depending on what edge you're working on. And then I also like to use a Teflon foot whenever I'm sewing with vinyl. I do make a lot of clear vinyl bags, and so using the Teflon foot is plastic, so it's just really easy to glide over vinyl. And then on the bottom right, that's a walking foot. I use that a lot whenever I'm sewing with a bunch of layers. That's a really nice foot because the little feed dogs on the top just glide over the fabric easily. So whenever you have bulky seams or thick fabric layers, the walking foot is just a really easy attachment to attach to your sewing machine. There's so many types of presser feet, and the ones that we went over today are the ones that I use the most, but there's so many different ones, so you may want to try and practice with a few different other ones. Your sewing machine comes with a few, so you may want to take a look at how those work, and just make sure you check your manual for the settings to make sure you're using the right settings with your presser foot. Let's talk about other tools that you may use when it comes to sewing. So in addition to needles and presser feet, there's also a whole bunch of different tools that's going to make sewing so much easier for you. The first hand tool on this list is a seam ripper, and I don't care how advanced you are, you will always use a seam ripper. I keep one really close by because whenever you mess up, you can undo the stitches with a seam ripper. The stiletto is another tool that I love because it really holds the fabric in place for you. It's almost like having a really long finger, pointy finger that can just hold the fabric right by the presser foot. So as you're sewing and you want to hold things in place, and also it punches holes through things, so whenever I need to add snaps or any type of bag hardware, I do use a stiletto to make the hole for it. I use a ton of clips to hold a lot of thick bag layers together, and pins to just hold pieces of the fabric together and keep everything in place. You can also grab a cutting mat and the acrylic ruler. It comes in a set at your local Hobby Lobby or Joann's. But that's a really good tool to have, just so that way when you're cutting things, your ruler can hold everything nice and neat, and the mat is nice to cut on. You'll always need measuring tape to make your measurements with, and a sewing gauge comes in handy whenever you're folding the fabric to make a nice even hem. I use that a lot at the rim of my bags just to make sure everything is even all the way around. And for your cutting tools, you definitely want to have a good pair of fabric scissors. And when I'm cutting thread, I use my little thread snips on the bottom left. Pinking shears are just good to have. It helps you minimize the fray on some of your woven fabrics and just give you a nice finished look on the edge of the fabric. And the rotary cutter just comes in the set with the cutting mat and the acrylic ruler. Some people like to use the rotary cutter instead of scissors, so you'll find whichever way works best for you. You will have to make marks on your fabric just to know where to start cutting or sewing. So the disappearing ink markers are really good to have. Usually they're water soluble or air soluble, and so they disappear. The marks will disappear with water or air. And then I like to have a little piece of tailor's chalk, because on dark fabrics I'll make a mark on those with the chalk, and that way you can just kind of rub it off or wipe it off and it goes away. And lastly, you will need some pressing tools like an iron, an ironing board, and then a sleeve pressing board is really nice because when it comes to seams, there's sometimes some narrow parts of the bag that you want to maybe slide the bag onto. So the sleeve pressing board is good for that. And then a pressing cloth, just make sure that you protect your iron and whatever bag or project you're working on, because I have damaged so many bags by not cleaning the iron. So you want to make sure you have a pressing cloth to protect both. But as you advance on your sewing journey, there's going to be a whole bunch of other tools that's going to help you along the way. So now let's talk about fabric and interfacing. Fabric is my favorite part of sewing because choosing the right fabric can really give your bag a lot of style, and it helps with the durability and the structure of the bag. So using cotton fabric is a great choice for beginners because it's easy to work with and it comes in a ton of different prints. I use cotton fabric for the lining and also for the outer layers of most of my bag. In addition to cotton fabric, there are a few other materials that I like to use as well, so let's take a look at a few of those too. Cotton fabric comes in so many different wonderful prints, and it's just easy to work with. And then canvas I use a lot for my Bible bags, and I use denim too, but canvas is nice and thick and sturdy, and it's very durable, so I love using that. And then on some of the bags, like the clear stadium bag pattern that I use vinyl. Some bags or pouches, I'll add a little clear window so you can add maybe an ID badge or something like that. Don't forget to attach your Teflon foot on the sewing machine whenever you're sewing with vinyl. In addition to fabric, you have to have some sort of backing on the fabric to give your project some sort of stability. So we use interfacings. There's a whole bunch of different interfacings that you can use, but there are a few common ones that I do like to use. Interfacings are just the support materials that are fused to the back of the fabric. It's usually in between the outer layers and the lining of the bag. Most interfacings have a fusible side, which you can fuse to the fabric with your iron by heat. I rarely use any sew-in interfacings, but sometimes when I want to do a little quilting on a purse or a bag, I'll use some cotton batting. And so I'll show you a few other interfacings as well that come in handy when it comes to bag making. So on the top left, we have the Pellon 931 TD fusible midweight interfacing. It comes 20 inches wide and is really good to use with lightweight fabrics to stiffen and reinforce and provide shape and retention to the bag that you're working on. And one side of it is fusible, so I do like to use fusible interfacing because it's just easier and it just adheres with your iron. So you don't have to worry about sewing it in. And then on the bottom left, my favorite interfacing is fusible fleece, only because it just adds a nice layer of softness, but it also gives your bag body a good amount of stability, but it has a lofty feel to it and it's made of 100% polyester. And on the top right, there's the Pellon cotton batting. Whenever I'm using some sort of quilting technique on a bag, I'll use the Pellon cotton batting. So this is made of 100% ultra clean cotton fibers that provide durability and softness to your projects, but it gives it also extra stability for quilting projects. And then on the bottom right is the Pellon Flex Foam, and it comes in 20 inches. So I use this whenever I want to make like iPad sleeves or laptop sleeves. It gives a good shape and support, but also protects whatever you put inside of the bag. So if you match the weight of the fabric to the weight of the interfacing, that's usually a good rule of thumb. If you're working with a thinner fabric, then a lightweight interfacing. But if you are using a thicker fabric, then you may want to use a heavier interfacing. You can also use different combinations depending on what type of bag you're working on and how much structure you want your bag to have. So using a lightweight interfacing with, say, a little bit of fusible fleece will give your bag more structure. So you can tweak the combinations depending on how much structure you want your bag to have. It's always good to test a little bit of the interfacing on the back of the fabric just to see how well they work together. If you would like to practice, try different needles and presser feet and different fabrics and interfacings, just so you can get a feel for how well they work with different needles and how well they work with your machine. Sometimes I like to go to the fabric store and just walk around and feel different fabrics. So you may want to just spend some time looking around your local fabric store just to get an idea of what's in there. And that's it, guys. That wraps up lesson 2. So in the next lesson, we'll talk about different skills and techniques that you need for sewing. So I'll see you in lesson 3.